Hi, everyone. My name is Keith Parent. I am the CEO of Square Group. I want to welcome you to the Driving the Business of Science podcast. Today, I have Shelley Amster as our guest. A little bit about the companies first before we get into our guest. For over 30 years, Square Group has been a managed service company, a technology company delivering managed service to life science companies, particularly those companies changing lives. And we have what's called ARC. It's an audit-ready compliant cloud environment that allows us to host and manage applications all the way from preclinical through manufacturing. We also have a system called RegDocs 365, which is a content repository for hosting any type of clinical or regulatory content. And it's used as a platform for many different companies, particularly in the clinical and regulatory space, and most likely anything that needs to have FDA scrutiny, particularly things that are going to be used as part of a submission. With that being said, I want to welcome our guest today, Shelley Amster. Shelley, great to have you on board today. And if you could just give us a few minutes of your background and talk a little bit about what you're up to these days, it'd be great.
Thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to spend this time with you. Just so you guys all know, Keith and I have known each other for a long time. I've actually knew him when I didn't realize that he was going to be Square Group when he was just a young man. But anyway, so I would say that I'm in my never wanting to retire chapter of my career. I've spent over 45 years, primarily in women's health, reproductive health, and male infertility, including in vitro fertilization. But in the middle of all of that, I've spent a lot of time bringing a sense of community to the small, very specialized, privately owned CROs and CDMOs in the greater Boston community to bring them together to the emerging biotech community. And I've spent a lot of time creating programming to do that. And along the way, I've helped them. Some of them got bought. And I've helped some of the small startup companies find the strategic partners and investors. So it's been a wonderful journey. And so what Keith is doing fits nicely into everything tied to all of the parts of my career.
Well, I think that's the important part about one of the reasons why I wanted to have Shelley on this call today, because or this podcast, because one of the things that I've noticed is in the industry over the last 30 years, I've met people that are very well connected with lots of different people. And Shelley is one of the most connected people I've ever met, from the fact, particularly in the Boston area, around a lot of the startups, the CROs that are out here, many of the companies that have been very successful in the Boston area. Shelley has been part of and knows people working there and has introduced myself to a number of people. Shelley, I'd love you to just talk a little bit about, what has intrigued you the most about working with some of these startups, and has it always been that way? Has it always been the startups that you've been going after, or have you? What else have you gone after?
Well, I really have not done much with the big pharma, big biotech companies, or the big CDMOs and CROs. I really like small teams and have access to the senior leadership, because I really feel that I can make an impact on all that I've done in various different ways to someone who I can talk directly to the leadership on.
When we talk about driving the business of science, one of the things that you and I talked about earlier today was just the fact that we know a lot of really good science that probably has never seen the light of day because either it didn't come out of the lab, somebody had a great idea, but they were too afraid to start a company, they didn't get funding, all these different things happen. One of the things that we try very hard at Square and at RegDocs is to help these small companies kind of minimize their burn rate, get out there, do what they need to do, but understand that you really have to understand that you're going out and you're trying to be a business. So in order to get that science out there and to be very successful, you've got to understand, what do I need to do to get to the next level? Can you talk a little bit about some of your advice and some of maybe your network that you introduce other people to, and why you do that and when you do that in their evolution?
So I I sometimes talk to academics trying to figure out how can I launch a company. And I find it frustrating because it's all about publications for them. It's all about getting the science published and moving the science from an academic standpoint. And it kind of frustrates me that sometimes the best science doesn't really get launched because of that. But on the flip side, when a marketing person or a BD person tries to launch a company without enough knowledge about the science or not willing to learn enough to bring in what you need to complement your skill set, things get stuck. So it's really important that you have someone that you can mentor. And this word mentoring, people, kind of poo-poo it or say it's overused, or some people say, I don't need mentoring. I still need mentoring. You still need mentoring. We all can learn. And if you're not learning, then you're not growing. So yeah, my biggest frustration is getting someone to realize what their shortcomings are and how to speed it up to find, like I just had a call this morning from a company in Germany who's wants to decide to do a 505(b)(2) or a 510(k), not knowing the regulatory pathway here. And she said, I've been following you. I want your advice. And I've been trying to reach certain companies. And I knew the 4 companies she needed to talk to. I just saved her 6 months of time that she's been wasting.
Well, and I think in this industry, a lot of times that warm introduction goes so much farther than trying to get through the phone lines or trying to get into these companies and talk to these people. So, if you're outside the area and you don't have the ability to hop in on some of these brews and biotech that you and I go to every once in a while and see the different entrepreneurs there, it's tough sometimes to break in and get to talk to some of these people.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, you had told me a little bit about an entrepreneur in residence that you are. Tell me a little bit about that and what that's all about.
So last summer, one of our mutual friends, Roger Frechette, told me that he's became an entrepreneur in resident with Army, which is the Dean Kamen's Regenerative Medicine Institute in Manchester, New Hampshire. And they have created a partnership with the New England Israeli Business Council and Harvard Medical School to bring, I think it's 4 or 5 cohorts of 6 companies, each cohort from Israel, that are looking to create a footprint here in the United States. And Roger asked me if I would meet with 3 of the women's health companies. One was a device company, a surgical device, and 2 were diagnostic companies, all in women's health. So I got brought into a preliminary meeting and then to the critique meeting with 50 or 20 other advisors. And I guess I made such an impression as you said, I gave them what they needed to know. I asked them the hard questions. And so I got approached if I wanted to be one in this next round for this year. So it's funded by the DoD. So we don't know if we're even getting the money based on what's going on at the federal level. But I have agreed, and I've been asked to help the 3 companies I did last year continue to help them. So it's really fun. It's mostly virtual. Once or twice during that period of time, we go to Harvard Medical School and we meet them and with each other.
It's interesting, Shelley, when people talk about, big pharma and they talk about, all these success stories around the Boston area. I don't think everybody really realizes how many small companies are out there that almost never see the light of day or don't get past that first round or whatever. In your experience working with a lot of those companies, how have you helped them to either find the right partners to work with or the right mentors? You mentioned mentoring before. How do you help them with that perspective? I know that you've introduced me to a number of people over the years, which I've been very grateful about. And I think that it all depends on where you are in your journey and how you can work with that. Tell me a little bit more about, what you see when you're working with these different companies.
Yeah, well, let me verify. Yeah, I'm amazed every day when I find out there are hundreds of more startups or early stage companies. And when I say early stage, something before it goes into clinical trials, um, that keep getting launched here. And just so you know, the ones that people hear about are the ones getting found and funded by the big VCs. Um, but there's so many living on grant money and early and friends and family seed money. Um, I find I've been really lucky, or the companies have been really lucky, that very few of the companies that I've been introduced to and agree to help actually have moved forward. The ones that have failed have not been mostly because of the team. It's mostly because the science failed. Um, and I do want to say that most companies, I would say when they say science fails, sometimes it's the leadership that fails. But yeah, I really have helped them find someone like you or the right company, the consultant to do the CMC or the, got them in the door to some investors because I've created quite a network of angel investors, as well as venture capital folks and investment bankers that take my call because they know I usually have my pulse on something worth their time.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of times we go to these events in the Boston area, and one of the things that I notice is you'll see a lot of service providers there. You're going to see a lot of accountants. You see a lot of banks, different ones are there. Those are meaningful because sometimes you have to get somebody who understands the life science world in order to be able to help them. Some people can walk into a bank, and if that bank has never dealt with a startup, it just doesn't work very well. So, just comment a little bit about that. I know that you're very close to a couple of people that are in the banking industry and do that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I do have a couple of go-to people. Some of you may know Danielle Silva O'Neill. And I've watched her grow from when she was one of the first employees of Life Science Nation, which is RESI. And even if she can't personally help them in their banking chapter, she'll introduce them to who they need to meet. And that's the case with so many of the people. Like when you go to a law firm, unless they're really helping you raise money, those big law firms charge you a lot of money to have corporate or patent law. And sometimes the smaller boutique firms are more hungry to be more hands-on and helpful. So I try to help them find the right fit. It's like the CFO. And I think Danforth Partners tried to be that originally, was that for those startup companies to have the part-time CFO, but now they're a big player and they cost a lot of money. But you do need the person that understands how different the financial, the legal, the HR, even I have this wonderful person Missy Fulton, who is your go-to person for everything legal and HR. And when you're starting a company, you need someone who understands the challenges of all of that.
Tell me a little bit about, when you're focused, you focus heavily on women's health. Tell me a little bit about that and what got you into that and why you're still focused to this day on a number of things in women's health. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I started in women's health by serendipity, which is how my whole career has actually been. Um, Back when I was in the late 70s, in my 20s, I got asked to set up a lab in OBGYN. And it just blew my socks off because I was right in a world that I knew I was living. I worked in a preterm clinic, which is an abortion clinic. I was helping people go through labor and delivery, and all of the things. And it got me really involved in infertility and in vitro fertilization. And fast forward to now, after launching co-launching a women's health company to address all the things that are wrong about IUDs, I reconnected with the whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs, and I'm now helping ones launch diagnostic companies, device companies, therapeutic companies in complementary spaces around everything that I am passionate about, treating endometriosis, getting better biomarkers and answers to everything that goes wrong during pregnancy. Um,
Well, I think it was
and I
interesting.
and
A
I
couple.
look back and I have a granddaughter who's just 1 year old, and I want to leave this world for her better than I found it when I got here.
Well, not this past ADDF, Advanced Drug Development Forum that you set up, but the one prior to that. I remember you had a women's health panel that had CEOs, women CEOs of women's health companies, and it was
Actually,
interesting.
there was 2 men.
Well, what I was interested with that was a lot of the issue was really around just a conversation around women's health in general. And one of the big things that people talked about was the fact that, big pharma, a lot of them are very male centric, male focused, and they don't put enough effort into women's health in general. So it was interesting to see a lot of the women CEOs, how much that they were able to do and kind of bring forward some of the concepts that they had out there. Is it tougher for them to try to find funding, is to do things that they need to do? Tell me a little bit about that.
So, first of all, yeah, there's been a big movement. Number one is to have a woman running or on the executive team of a women's health company. For a long time, I thought that was really the right thing. But it really says a lot to me when a man is championing a women's health company. So I kind of really embrace that. But as far as the investment world, it really frustrates me because there's 2 things going on here. Big pharma, who's going to be the end game for all of these companies, is not putting as much effort into women's health as it did. Maybe they're not winning enough money, and it is always about the money. And the venture world, they don't get involved in it because if they don't have an end game with pharma, why would they get involved? But then you hear there's a lot of activity in women's health. If you read Pitch Book, and what you're not seeing or people aren't looking at, there are a lot of little deals, a lot of little dollars going into a lot of companies that are not really moving the needle on disrupting diagnosis, treatment, and surgical improvements. They're giving them more data, and more data makes the patient more stressful. So, and I find that the women, the femtech investors, as they like to be called, are risk adverse. So they only put little dollars in. They're not real VCs, even if they call themselves VCs. Does that answer your question?
It does. I guess, I've been very involved in women's health as well. Last year, I had one of my companies that I was working with, we merged into a company called Storycatch Partners. And one of the things that we're trying to do is take that that company and make it into more of a registry company. And one of the first registries we're going to do is a health and wellness registry, but another one is going to be a women's health registry. And part of that was driven by the wife of the CTO, who she had hot flashes during COVID, and she recognized when she had COVID, all of a sudden her hot flashes went away for a few months. And then she was reaching out to the research network that she was a part of, and she found out that a number of women had the same issue. And every time they got sick after that, they lost hot flashes for a period of time. So it was something that everybody kind of said, hey, maybe there's something here about that. So, when we did a women's health kind of got a lot of women together talking about that stuff, a focus group, all of a sudden there was just all these other things going on. So we're going to do a general women's health. And then also I just started working recently with a group at UMass Medical, and they've actually had a women's health initiative for a long time, which is great. And, with ARPA-H and the stuff that's going on in the Boston area, it seems like we are in a great place to be at the epicenter of a lot of the women's health kind of movement that's happening in this area. So it seems like you're a hot commodity for some of those kind of things. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, one of my longtime reproductive endocrinology friends, who I knew him when he was a resident at Yale, and he was division chair and chairman in Boston and New York, is now division chair at UMass Medical in OBGYN. And he ran a research institute at Woods Hole, so we need to get you together with him. And his name is Dr. David Keefe, and he's spectacular. So you really got my attention regarding this hot flashes that went away during COVID. I would have thought the opposite would have been happening. So I think that's something we need to really look at and look at the data of what was found about it, because maybe there's an underlining treatment here. Because one of the things that is a lot of noise about is menopause and premenopause and perimenopause. And the hot flashes are usually the top of the subject. So, and I bet UMass Medical would love to get a research project going about that.
Well, I think it's interesting. We talk about the business of science, so maybe there's a business in there somewhere. So
Yeah.
we'll see as we start to gather data around some of those things.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about a lot of different things. I'd love to see if we could kind of wrap things up with what are your thoughts about the industry? What kind of words of advice do you have for particularly the startup companies you deal with, maybe the academicians that are coming out of academia and trying to start a business? What do you think about that? And what would you say from words of advice and how you can help them?
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot when, first of all, 3 daughters came out of the IELTS program at UMass Amherst. And as helpful as IELTS was, what they hopefully learned was there were 2 companies that came out of that the academic partnered with a business person. And I think that needs to happen before you decide to create a company, is to spend a year or so doing a deep dive around the business behind the technology and bring together the right people that we've discussed. And most of the tech transfer centers around try to do it, but I think it's almost like they're launching companies too prematurely. But secondly, I'd like to say that one of the companies that I wanted to introduce you to is an example of a startup company that brought the right people together and is continuing to do that instead of thinking he knows it all. He's got 2 brilliant complementary scientific partners, and he brought in my friend Roger and I to be business and strategic advisors. And not only did he bring us in just to be not wallpaper, he meets with us every week for just a half an hour and values everything that we give him. And he writes thank you. And so many people just think, oh, Shelley, can you give me an hour of your time and milk me dry, and aren't appreciative. And then you find out they took all your advice and took it as their own. But there's this wonderful, and I've been really good at picking companies like that are starting out, really hungry to do it right.
I think that's great. I think that's good. And just so I can tell people, so the excuse me, the Institute for Advanced Life Science, IELTS, is at UMass Amherst in Amherst, Mass. So just so people understand where that's from and what Shelley was talking about a little bit earlier. So thank you very much, Shelley. It's been a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
having you on the podcast. Hopefully we'll have you on again. You're doing so much stuff, and maybe we'll talk specifically to one of your companies or one of the groups that you're working with and have a group discussion. Thank
Great.
you,
I'm
Shelley.
sure they'd love it. Thank you, Keith.
Have a great day. Thanks everybody for listening in on the Driving the Business of Science podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.